He woke up to another day feeling the invisible weight on his chest. He couldn't name what it was, but it was there, constant, suffocating, real. He looked to the side of the bed and she had already gotten up. No good morning, no touch, not even that look he used to find years ago. When was the last time she truly saw him? Not with her eyes, but with that kind of attention that makes you feel important, desirable, present? Many men are living this experience at this very moment. We are not talking about infidelity, fights, or aggression. We are talking about something far more subtle and devastating, the silent erosion of masculine identity through the gradual withdrawal of affection and admiration. It is a form of violence that leaves no visible marks, generates no police reports, and does not appear in statistics. But it destroys from the inside, cell by cell, day after day. What makes this phenomenon so dangerous is precisely its invisible nature. There is no dramatic moment where everything collapses. There is no clear point where you can say, this is where everything changed. It is like watching a plant wither. You don't see the exact second each leaf loses its life, but one day you realize there is nothing green left. Female admiration functions as a fundamental psychological mirror in the construction of male identity within intimate relationships. When a man feels that his partner admires him, he becomes more confident, creative, productive, and present. There is an energy that flows from him into the world. But when that mirror begins to reflect indifference, contempt, or disinterest, something inside him starts to shut down. The process is insidious. It begins with small signs, a look that lasts half a second less, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, a monosyllabic response where there used to be enthusiasm. He shares an achievement at work and receives a flat "that's good." He tries to initiate physical intimacy and notices her body stiffening, as if it were an obligation to be fulfilled. He shares an idea and hears a sigh before the response. Each isolated gesture seems too small to be mentioned. After all, how do you complain that her sigh hurts? How do you explain that the way she looks at her phone while you're talking is eroding your self-confidence? It sounds ridiculous even to himself. So he swallows it, ignores it, rationalizes it. She must be tired, I'm exaggerating, every relationship goes through phases like this. But the human brain records everything. Each micro-rejection is stored, creating an emotional database that begins to inform how he sees himself. The problem is not a single event, it is the pattern. It is the systematic repetition of signals that say, you're not enough, you no longer interest me, your presence is irrelevant. What many do not understand is that men, despite all the socialization that teaches them to be strong and independent, develop a deep emotional bond with their partners. When a woman chooses a man, when she shows desire and admiration for him, this is not just pleasant, it becomes part of the structure of how he perceives himself. She is not just his companion, she is the thermometer of his masculinity, the validator of his existence. And here lies the great danger. When this validation begins to be withdrawn little by little, the man does not lose only her affection, he loses pieces of himself. Her voice, which once said you are capable, now silently echoes you fail at everything. The look that once energized him now drains him. The body that once welcomed him now rejects him. The conflict sets in when he notices the change but cannot articulate it. How do you fight something that has no name? How do you defend your dignity when there are no explicit attacks? He tries to talk, but the words come out confused. I feel like you don't want me close anymore. It seems like everything I do is wrong. She responds with denial or impatience. You're making things up, I don't know what you're talking about, you're being dramatic. This invalidation of his perception is the second blow. First, he loses affection. Then, he even loses the right to name the loss. Now he is not just suffering, he is going insane, because the reality he lives is denied by the one person who could confirm it. If you are following this explanation and recognize something familiar, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Write in the comments which city or country you are watching from and whether this topic resonates with your experience. Your participation helps spread this necessary discussion. The man then enters a devastating cycle. He begins trying to win back the lost admiration. He does more household chores, brings more gifts, tries to be more attentive, more present, more available. But the more he tries, the less she seems to value it. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips away. This happens because the dynamic has fundamentally changed. At the beginning of the relationship, He was someone she wanted to win over. There was respect, curiosity, genuine attraction. Now, he has become someone who begs for crumbs of attention. And nothing destroys attraction faster than desperation for approval. The polarity of the relationship inverts. He stops being the man she admired and becomes the man who needs her admiration in order to exist. She feels this change viscerally, even without being able to explain it. The confident man who attracted her has been replaced by someone insecure, who constantly seeks validation, who over-explains himself, who hesitates before every decision. And here is the cruelty of the process. The more he tries to recover what he lost, the deeper he sinks into the hole. Each attempt to please confirms his subordinate position. Each request for affection reinforces that he is no longer desirable enough for her to want him spontaneously. Each explanation demonstrates that he has lost the right to simply be accepted as he is. The conflict is now fully established. He lives in a relationship where his presence is tolerated, not celebrated. Where his efforts are invisible or insufficient. Where his need for connection is treated as an inconvenience. And worst of all, he has neither the emotional vocabulary nor the social permission to say that he is being destroyed on the inside. Society expects men to be resilient, not to depend emotionally on anyone, not to be affected by small things like lack of affection or admiration. So he carries everything alone, believing that the problem is him, that he needs to be stronger, more independent, more self-sufficient. The process of psychological destruction deepens through specific mechanisms that operate in the shadows of consciousness. It is not just the lack of affection that corrodes, it is the particular ways this absence manifests in everyday life. Each interaction becomes an emotional minefield where he never knows which step will detonate the next rejection. Constant corrections are one of the most effective weapons of this silent violence. He tells a story at dinner and she interrupts to correct irrelevant details. It wasn't on Tuesday, it was on Wednesday. It wasn't 3 people, it was 4. You always exaggerate the numbers. The message behind these corrections is not about factual accuracy. It is about establishing that he is not trustworthy, that his version of reality is always wrong, that his word needs to be constantly adjusted and supervised. Tone of voice is another devastating instrument. She may say the right words, but the way they come out of her mouth carries poison. It's fine, that means the opposite. A whatever you want loaded with resignation and contempt. A you always do this disguised as a neutral observation. The man learns to fear not what she says, but how she says it. And this creates an exhausting hypervigilance where he is constantly trying to decode her mood before opening his mouth. Depreciative jokes in public function as social humiliation disguised as humor. In front of friends, she comments on how he can't handle basic tasks, how he always forgets things, how he is childish in certain situations. Everyone laughs, including him, because refusing to laugh would mean not having a sense of humor. But each joke is a knife. Each shared laugh confirms that his inadequacy is visible and accepted even by others. Systematic sexual disinterest becomes one of the deepest blows. We are not talking only about reduced frequency, but about the quality of the rejection. She agrees to have sex occasionally, but in a mechanical, rushed way, without presence. Her body is there, but the person is not. He feels like he is using the body of someone who would rather be anywhere else. And this makes him feel dirty, invasive, undesirable at visceral levels. Worse still, when he stops initiating to avoid further rejection, she doesn't notice. Weeks pass without meaningful physical contact and she doesn't mention it, doesn't question it, doesn't miss it. The message is clear, his sexual presence makes no difference in her life. You can exist or not, it doesn't matter. Calculated delays in replying to messages are microaggressions of the digital world. He sees that she is online, posting stories, replying to comments, but his message sits unanswered for hours. When the reply finally comes, it is monosyllabic. He observes how she responds quickly to friends, to work, even to strangers on social media. But for him, it always takes time. His priority in her life is brutally exposed. The lack of genuine enthusiasm for his achievements and projects is another form of erosion. He gets an important promotion and receives a congratulations that sounds like someone commenting on the weather. He starts a personal project and she doesn't ask a single question about the progress. He notices that she shows more excitement for TV series than for anything related to him. What makes all of this particularly destructive is the impossibility of direct confrontation. How do you accuse someone of not showing enough enthusiasm? How do you fight over a sigh? When he tries to address the issue, she always has a rational explanation. She was tired, she was stressed at work, he is being too sensitive. All couples go through this. And maybe she truly believes that. Maybe there is no malicious intent. But lack of intent does not cancel impact. A person can be drowning you without realizing they are holding your head underwater. The pain does not lessen because the aggressor was not fully aware of what they were doing. The man then develops emotional survival behaviors that only make the situation worse. He begins to test her affection in indirect ways. He goes quiet to see if she notices. Pretends to be busy to see if she misses him. Provokes small conflicts just to generate any kind of emotion, because even anger is better than indifference. Anger means he still matters enough to provoke a reaction. He also begins to collect evidence mentally. He remembers exactly when the last time was that she initiated a kiss, showed pride in him, asked how his day really was. These dates are engraved as milestones of a progressive emotional hunger. He knows he is doing this, knows it is pathetic, but he cannot stop. His self-image begins to fragment. In public, at work, with friends, he still functions. But alone, in front of the mirror or during sleepless nights, a repetitive inner voice hammers. You are not enough, you are not interesting, you are not desirable, you do not deserve to be chosen. And the most terrible part, this voice does not sound like her voice. It sounds like his own, because he has completely internalized the contempt. He stops sharing dreams because he learned they will be met with skepticism. Stops expressing needs because he learned they will be seen as weakness. Stops trying for emotional connection because he learned he will be ignored or ridiculed. Each silence of his is a wound that healed incorrectly, leaving the area dysfunctional. Social isolation intensifies. He distances himself from friends because he has no energy to pretend he is fine. Avoids family because he doesn't want to hear questions about the relationship. Dives into work or solitary hobbies not out of passion, but out of escape. Anything to avoid being at home, not to feel her presence absence, not to face another day of the toxic dynamic. And still he stays. Because he has invested so much. Because he is afraid to start over. Because he thinks no one else will want someone so broken. Because she occasionally has a good day where she shows a bit of the old affection, and that is enough to renew the hope that things can return to normal. This sporadic emotional crumb functions as intermittent reinforcement, the type of psychological conditioning that is hardest to break. The point of collapse arrives when the man realizes a devastating truth. Even if she changed now, even if she returned to showing affection and admiration, something fundamental inside him has already been destroyed. The critical voice that once came from the outside now lives permanently inside his head. He has become his own executioner. This realization usually happens in an apparently banal moment. He is drinking coffee alone, driving to work, or simply looking out the window, and suddenly the full reality hits him like a train. It's not just the relationship that is broken, he is broken. The erosion was not only of love or connection, it was of his own psychological structure. He tries to remember who he was before. That man who had firm convictions, who made decisions without second-guessing every move, who laughed easily, who dreamed without fear. It feels like another life, another person. As if that man had died slowly and no one ever held a funeral. Not even he himself noticed exactly when he stopped existing. His brain's executive function begins to visibly fail. Simple decisions become insurmountable mountains. Choosing what to eat, what clothes to wear, which route to take. Everything requires energy he no longer has. He develops decision paralysis because he has learned that any choice he makes will be wrong, criticized, or ignored. So why choose? Work begins to suffer. Projects that once excited him now feel empty. He does the bare minimum, automatically, without creativity or passion. Colleagues notice the change but attribute it to stress or burnout. No one suspects that the real problem is that he is being slowly dismantled at home, piece by piece. Physical health also declines. He sleeps poorly because the bed is an emotional battlefield. He eats badly because he has lost pleasure in food. His posture changes, slumped shoulders, lowered head, restrained movements. The body physically manifests what the mind cannot put into words. He is literally shrinking, taking up less space in the world. Friends try to understand what happened to him. You're different, you disappeared, did something happen? He smiles and lies, everything's fine, I'm just tired. Because how do you explain that you are starving emotionally inside a relationship? How do you articulate that the person who should be your safe harbor has become the sea that is drowning you? Some men at this stage develop thoughts of simply disappearing. Not necessarily suicide in the classic sense, but fantasies of starting over somewhere else, with another identity, where no one knows the broken version of them. A complete reset of existence. These thoughts scare even themselves, but they offer temporary relief from the constant pain. Others plunge into addictions, compulsive work, pornography, games, alcohol, anything that numbs the pain for a few hours. These are not attempts at pleasure, they are attempts not to feel. There is a fundamental difference between seeking joy and fleeing suffering. He is firmly in the second territory. The emotional climax happens when he finally names what he is living. This is abuse. Not the kind that leaves bruises or appears in dramatic films, but systematic psychological abuse through the withdrawal of affection, subtle contempt, constant invalidation. And this naming is simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Liberating because he finally has words for his experience. He is not crazy, not imagining things, not being weak or dramatic. There is a recognizable, studied, documented pattern of what he is suffering. Other men have gone through this. He is not alone in his pain. Terrifying because now he has to make decisions. He can no longer hide in denial or in the hope that things will improve on their own. Knowing means having to act. And acting means facing all the fears that keep him stuck. Fear of loneliness, fear of failing in another relationship, fear of discovering that he is irreparably damaged. He looks to the future and sees two possible paths. The first is to continue as he is, accept that this is his life now, resign himself to a minimal emotional existence. Millions of men make this choice every day. They live decades in emotionally dead relationships, functioning but not living, existing but not flourishing. The second path is rupture. It means difficult conversations, possible separation, complete reconstruction of life. It means admitting that he invested years in something that destroyed him. It means facing the social shame of giving up on the relationship. It means loneliness, at least initially. It means not knowing who he is outside this dynamic because it has been so long since he existed independently. Both paths seem impossible. Staying is dying slowly. Leaving is dying all at once and having to be reborn. And he is so exhausted that he is not sure he has the energy for either option. So he remains paralyzed in this limbo, knowing he needs to change but without the strength to execute the change. The only certainty he has is this: he cannot continue pretending that everything is fine. The mask he wears for the world is starting to crack. Soon everyone will see the emptiness behind it. And maybe, just maybe, that will be the final push he needs to do what must be done. Because deep down, beneath all the layers of conditioning and fear, there is still a fragment of the original man. Small, wounded, hidden, but alive. And that fragment is screaming for rescue. Recovery does not begin with a heroic decision or a cinematic moment of transformation. It begins with a brutal and honest recognition: you cannot heal inside the same environment that made you sick. It is impossible to rebuild your identity while the hammer that destroyed it keeps striking every day. The first crucial step is understanding that the problem was never your inability to be loved. The problem was being under a distorted mirror for too long. You began to believe that the distorted reflection was your true image. But a broken mirror does not show your real appearance. It only shows the fracture of the mirror itself. Many men make the fatal mistake of trying to fix themselves in order to deserve the affection that was denied to them. They go to therapy focusing on their own flaws, read books about how to be a better partner, work tirelessly on personal improvements. All of this while remaining in the toxic relationship. It is like trying to heal a wound that continues to be cut every single day. The inconvenient truth is that, in most cases, recovery requires physical and emotional distance from the source of destruction. This does not mean that every relationship where there is a lack of affection is doomed, but it does mean that you cannot negotiate your basic value as a human being. Respect is not something you earn through perfect performance. It is something that should be given by default. Establishing real boundaries is fundamental. Not empty threats or dramatic ultimatums, but clear consequences that are actually enforced. I no longer accept being spoken to this way, and when it happens again, you act accordingly. You leave the room, leave the house, eventually leave the relationship if necessary. Many men discover that they never had real boundaries, only imaginary lines that they themselves allowed to be crossed repeatedly. The reconstruction of identity happens through the re-establishment of external sources of value that do not depend on a partner's approval. Reconnecting with friends, investing in abandoned hobbies, pursuing professional achievements, developing new skills. Each small victory outside the relationship is a brick in the rebuilding of self-esteem. It is important to understand that you will carry scars. The internalized critical voice does not disappear immediately when you leave the toxic situation. It was programmed over months or years of conditioning. But now you can begin to consciously reprogram it. Each time the voice says you are not enough, you can respond with concrete evidence to the contrary. Some men discover that they need professional help to process the trauma. Yes, trauma. Because prolonged psychological violence leaves marks as real as physical violence, just harder to see. Therapy with professionals who understand emotional abuse can be transformative. Not to fix you, but to help you understand that you were never broken. The most powerful lesson is this: your need for affection, admiration, and respect is not weakness. It is basic humanity. Men are not emotionally self-sufficient machines. The social narrative that says you should be able to live without deep emotional connection is a cruel lie that keeps men trapped in destructive situations. You did not fail for needing your partner's affection. You are not less of a man for being affected by its absence. The failure would be continuing to accept emotional crumbs and calling that love. The failure would be spending your one life in a psychological prison built by someone who should have been your ally. Healthy polarity in relationships does not come from one side begging while the other scoffs. It comes from two complete individuals who choose to share their lives, not from someone broken trying to complete himself through the validation of the other. You need to be whole first. And you cannot become whole while you are being systematically dismantled. There is life after this experience. Men who leave emotionally abusive relationships often describe a feeling of resurrection. As if they were breathing fully again for the first time in years. Colors become more vivid, food tastes better, sleep is deeper. They did not realize how much they were merely surviving until they experienced living again. But this resurrection requires courage. Courage to admit that the relationship failed. Courage to face social judgment. Courage to be alone temporarily. Courage to believe that you deserve more than what you received. And above all, courage to choose your mental sanity and human dignity over the safety of a familiar relationship, even if that relationship is killing you from the inside. If you made it this far in this explanation and recognized your own story, know that you are not alone. Millions of men live this reality silently. Share this content, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and write in the comments where you are watching from. Your interaction helps carry this message to other men who need to hear that there is a way out. The final conclusion is clear and non-negotiable. You are not broken because you are inadequate or insufficient. You were broken because you stayed too long in an environment that treated your humanity as optional. Recovery begins when you finally believe that you deserve to be treated with the same basic consideration you would give to any human being. And you deserve it. You always did.